Good afternoon. Welcome back to this session. In earlier session we were talking about organization and work, the meaning of work, how work plays an important role in a person's life, what are the different approaches towards work, and at present we are dealing with the scientific management approach. So I request Professor Bharadwaj to continue it, and I request all of you to pose some questions so that it will become more interactive.
Welcome back. We had just finished with Taylorism, but there are more isms in this and more approaches in analyzing the work. So we take up one very pragmatic approach that was by Henry Ford I. You must have heard about Ford Motors, and he was the one who actually started the factory schools for training the workers, and he kind of believed in surplus economy, that is paying the workers 4 to 5 times more than what they deserve and then getting more work out of them. And he started the assembly line technology, where people with little understanding can be trained with the hands-on training. So fast working and easy replaceability. And he gave this concept of mass workers. See, earlier it was in Taylorism, it was individual worker to be trained and made competent, but with Ford we come to the mass workers, and the idea basically was to not to lose any time, and whosoever can be replaced is replaced very quickly. And then we come to another movement which revolutionized the world of work, was the human relations approach. This was a group of Harvard scientists led by Elton Mayo, Roethlisberger and others. They went to find out the root cause of absenteeism in Hawthorne electric wires. And they were, observing the people and interviewing people. They started certain experiments, and one of the experiments I'll tell you was in the relay assembly room, where they were kind of making bulbs, electric bulbs, and there they tried to know how the increasing of electricity in terms of foot candles going to affect the speed and volume of production. So they increased, and up to one level the increase was there in production, but later on with the increase the ratio did not continue. So just for the sake of interest they started decreasing. What happens if you decrease the light? But very surprisingly they found that even when they decreased, people kept on increasing their work production or maintained it, and to the extent that when the light was almost to the level of moonlight, people kept on working. Now this showed that there is something beyond money, which was basically the incentive by whether you take Ford or you take Taylor. The incentive is just not restricted to money, but there is something else, and this was their achievement, a great achievement in the sense that they said that people can sacrifice their individual interests for the sake of team, for the sake of supervisor. If there is a good supervisor, then people can be motivated to work without much of financial support or reward. So this was where they de-emphasized the technical components, especially the financial ones, and then said that if you can whip up a team spirit, then that is good enough to replace all kinds of incentives, and people will work despite being not materially rewarded. So what they did, they emphasized the social and psychological needs of the workers. That was very important, because there, why it is called human relations, they emphasized the humanity, the human side of people, and they said that if you put regular emphasis on the people as human beings, as social beings and take care of those needs, then you can make them work like wonders. So workers act as a part of group, and they can also sacrifice some of their self-interest. And main thing for which they were criticized also, money is not the sole motivator, rather it is the social and individual needs. And supervisors' role was emphasized by them by saying that if there is a supervisor who can bring in people's sense of social existence, then people would work for that supervisor even in bad conditions, like working in almost lowest level of light, that is moonlight. And one more thing that was also path-breaking, they brought the attention to the fact that informal organizations are equally important than the formal organizations. So informal part of the organization starts playing a huge role in making productions or productive workers more productive and make them work relentlessly without much coaxing and guiding. Then there is, if you look at the next slide.
Before we proceed to the other one,
Yeah.
I would like to know whether this approach has any emphasis in modern day life.
Yes, that's a very important question. It does have a very important contributions towards the modern day life, in the sense that workers to be treated as human beings, not a part of the machine. But the main folly of this system was that they also used this human side as a indicator, as a cue for increasing production. They did not work towards the welfare of the individual worker. So today in the modern time is the cultural aspects, the social aspects, which are very important, and they should not be downplayed. Basically, Mayo's work has been criticized on this basis, that he is using the social side, the human side of the worker to improve the work, the production. So he is not actually working for the human welfare. So if you combine the human relations movement and with a proper attitude towards the human worker, then it works even today. Okay. So we come to the next, you can say, design of work, which was coming from again coal mines, where we have people, great names like Trist, Bamworth, Rice, who were working again to see the impact of technological factors on mining, coal mining in England. And these people were involved in studying what kind of impact the technology would have on the workers, whether facilitating, like designing good systems, good production lines, does it help? But they found, on contrary, it didn't help. People went on strike, they didn't report on the work, though all the modern gadgets were in those times put into practice and they were facilitated, but it really did not facilitate. And social scientists again were called in to find out what went wrong. They found that the technology interferes with the social side. People knew when they were going deep down the earth for mining purposes, they knew their team, they knew their workers, they were working closely. But the modern technology, the long wall method, made them stay apart, and they did not know who was going with whom. So that social pattern was disturbed, and what they proposed was that if you combine the two, the social part as well as the technical aspects of the job, then it can yield good results. A.K. Rice also worked in Ahmedabad Calico Mills and in India, and there also he used this same pattern and he found wonderful results. So if you combine the basic crux of this system, which is talking about the designing of job, analyzing and understanding work, if you combine the social with technological and without reducing the worth of any one of them. Technology is very important to deal with changes, but the social side, the worker is also a social being. Man is a social animal. So we cannot neglect that. So both have to be combined, and this can cope with the fast changes that are required for technological innovations and technological support. So the amount of flexibility that is required is a prerequisite of socio-technical system, and this is where they emphasize that reduce bureaucracy. This is the starting time for debureaucratization of the organizations. Bureaucracy did contribute a lot towards making the organizations what they are today, but at this point we find that one of the preconditions of putting social and technical system in collaboration, in tandem with each other, was debureaucratization, and the starting point of having lean and flat organizations where there aren't too many people. Technology brings that part, that it replaces the human being. So it is the starting of lean organizations, and social part promotes or prescribes that there should not be power distances in terms of its hierarchy. So there should be a flat organization where people can be together and work in a team, and this was the starting point of work teams. Instead of calling them as laborers or employees, they were renamed as work teams, and that made a lot of difference as far as the individual worker or miner was concerned. Talking about the modern approaches, we have been analyzing the history a lot. Now we come to the modern approaches, which is depending on social scientists, behavioral scientists, economists and such people. Here we have great names like Maslow, Herzberg and Cards and Kahn, who have brought in that an overall holistic look towards the individual competencies and organizational needs must be brought together, and the individual's motivation is to be given a premium. It should not be that people are just related to for their financial needs or taken care of their financial needs, but what is required is going for individual motivation. Each worker you must know. You means the supervisor, the person who is in close contact, and relate to, and not only as a part of the organization, not as only the part of work team, but as an individual, as a co-worker. So individual motivation is given an importance. Another change that has been brought forth is the logical approach. Instead of going haphazard, taking care of all the technological needs and human needs, making a mess of it, the logical approach has been taken care of. Here we find that the jobs have been designed. A pattern has been given, not a mechanical, technological oriented pattern of Taylor or Ford. It is taking care of the human side, behavior side, social side, as well as the technological side. So an amalgamation of all these issues into designing the job, where the participation, like Likker's whole orientation towards participation, how participation can be made democratic, a requirement of the organization. So that is required. Joint consulting teams, participating partners, people become partners in their organization, in their jobs. So it's just not working for the sake of getting money or working for the sake of occupation, but rather participating in organizational activity. Then comes the notion of job redesign, because job design emphasized lots of technological facts. Job redesign took in behavioral and human side and then found a formula for enhancing the motivation. Then Husberg's two concepts of job enlargement and job enrichment, that is where jobs are added, expanded is enlargement, more duties, make it more interesting. Enrichment referring to intrinsic qualities of the job, how it motivates, how it brings pride, sense of pride, understanding. All such things are required in the logical approach for designing a job. But the problem with behavioral science is that they cannot give you a universal answer, a packaged answer for all else. They don't have any panacea. So, all these organizations are situated in different contexts. What is applicable in India may not be applicable in Japan, or whatever is applicable in Japan is not applicable in US or UK. So the Western, Eastern, Middle East, all such divisions, they create context. So internationalization of work has made the behavioral scientist unable to give a one rule, one formula, like McGregor's XY or Auchi's Z management, so many things that have been happening, but there is no single formula for all the context. One has to work for the context demands, technological demands, human demands, social demands, economic demands. All such demands have to be taken care of, and it's a multiplex, complex problem. So you cannot have one solution driven for all answers. And one more thing that was brought in the modern approaches is the contingency approach. To solve this kind of complexity, we go to the contingency approach, and this approach says that depending on the kind of needs, the kind of resources available, the kind of political practices, management practices, requirements, you have to make planning for the day, maybe at the most for tomorrow, but not forever. So long-term planning may be on the papers, but what is happening in today's world, we are following the contingency approach, like the Indian economic growth, the Chinese economic growth, taking up the world by storm. Now this is where the people were not prepared, and they won't be able to deal if they go for say the management by X and Y or Z. So you have to be prepared for these certain changes and be proactive. What contingency theory always promotes is that you act as per the given order of the day and be proactive in predicting what may happen in the near future or maybe in the far future. So these uncertainties, dealing with the uncertainties, which is a main obstacle in understanding work and organization, contingency approach has been working to the best of its efforts, but it also may not be applicable if the changes are too fast or people do not like to change. It depends on many things, people's attitudes and their programs. Now we come to the next part, that is how do we improve the work and how do we measure the work. Work improvement and work measurement. These two are two different kinds of approaches, but they are related. They are not standing in isolation. The work improvement study or method of engineering is using the scientific techniques of studying and analyzing the conditions that influence the quality and quantity of work. We have mainly the human engineering and ergonomics, which is the science of human engineering. Basically, the idea here is to see what can we do to reduce the fatigue and optimize the work without creating those conditions where it is too dehumanized. So this is work improvement, scientifically studying the work methods, and the work measurement is corollary of this, is where you are studying the time taken by the work, the labor cost, the data for efficient planning, you need some data, then control of that data. One thing very important here, one must understand the effective manning of the plant. It doesn't mean recruitment, it means manning. Who is where? Is the guard the right kind of person? Is the person who is working on the assembly line has that ability to stand on his 2 feet for a long period of time? So manning of the plant and equipment. Is the equipment really supporting, or one has to keep running for that equipment? So manning and equipment are there to reduce time, and this can be only studied by understanding the time factor. We go into details little later, but the time reduced means also the cost reduced, because if you reduce the time, you reduce the extra physical efforts or extra time that is taken for finding the right kind of equipment. Alright, so there we have the time studies, the part of work measurement. Now we come to the actual studies that are there. The first one, following Taylor, is the time and motion study. This was started by the followers or students of Taylor, Gilbreths, Dr. and Mrs. Gilbreth, and this time and motion study is basically a process driven study which analyzes the job and it tries to find the most effective and most economical way of doing it with the help of close scrutiny of motions made by the worker or machine. This means that when you are working, especially in physical conditions, like if you are working with computer, how conveniently the monitor is placed before you, how is the mouse placed, how is the keyboard placed, all these matter. If all these things are scattered, then you won't be able to handle them properly. So how could we come to this kind of understanding? By studying people, their motions. What kind of motions? Motions of the hand, feet, eyes, body, entire thing. We keep on involving, watching and recording. Now there are 3 components that are there in the time motion study. One is the Therblix. Therblix is actually the, if you reverse the spelling of Gilbreth, you come to Therblix. It is 17 component of the motions that are made by individual worker while he or she is working. This whole thing was derived by observing and putting into practice the bricklaying functions of a bricklayer, from the mixing of the mortar to taking up the brick and putting the mortar in place, placing the brick, like that. So these were analyzed into 17 components, and generally these components, these 17 components are applicable to almost all physical job, whether it is a motor mechanic's job or the assembly line worker's job. All these are very micro level components, like reaching out, catching, holding, placing the elbow, laying the artifact, picking up the instrument. All such things are very well clearly delineated and they are put into details. So these Therblix are there, which are very helpful. Then the micro motion study. Here the camera is fitted, a motion camera which can take 1,000 pictures in 1 minute, and with the help of those micro level motions that are made by human hand, all the muscles, how they are working, how they are convenienced or inconvenienced, all these details are noted, and then different kinds of recordings are done to know which kind of posture suits the worker best, where should one place the instruments, where one should place the eye level for materials. All such things are taken care of by the micro motion camera, and you need a camera where the frames, 1,000 frames per minute. This was way back. Now the technology has improved. We may have many more frames in that, but it helps in, especially this is used for pilot training jobs or driving jobs where simulation is used. These micro motion studies are of great help. And third is the principles of motion economy, meaning that first thing, one should not be made to stand for long hours. This is one thing. Then one is discouraged to stoop and pick up things. They should be at the level which is most convenient, at your elbow level. Then elbow should not be raised for longer period of time at one stretch. All these are motion economy. How can you economize the motions that you make? And this is mostly related with the hand movements and the eye movement. How the eye-hand coordination goes on, that is a very important part of this time and motion study. Then we come to the time study.
Yeah, I just wanted to know the relevance of time and motion study. Are we using these things?
Yes, we are using it, especially in defense. We are using it quite a lot. And the basic idea here is to see that people's body are not put in a position where they get fatigued very easily. The fatigue part is at best removed, and the important thing is that when you do this, then how much pressure you apply to the trigger, for example. That is measured only by using the time and motion studies. And like the pilots, there are different instruments that they use, how they are facilitated. So these are used, and we have now better technology to use it, and it helps in preventing accidents, preventing fatigue and all such things. Then we come to time study. Basically, if you just want to reduce it to one sentence, this is determining a standard day's work. How much work should you put in a span of 8 hours? And there is a lot of controversy about that. Some people say it should be 40 days a week. Some say it should be 42. Some say it is 48. Nowadays they are saying that it should be 60 hours.
12 hours per day.
12 hours per day, 5 days a week. So these are, it's not a fixed thing. That shows that time study is not a fixed thing, especially with the advent of flexi time and work from home, all such things. There is a very difficult thing to decide what is a standard day's work, but one can try. Now, how do we go about it? This is what we discuss here, that we have to select, not all, but a specific work to be studied, like the Air Force pilot's job, that work, or how much time does he require for getting ready and reaching his workplace in the case of emergency. All such things are the time study results. So what is the work to be studied? That is very key area. If you falter there, then problems will be there. You cannot generalize, first thing. No generalization is possible. It is only specific to the work that is given. Then we have to choose those standardized methods that are used, equipments and working conditions. Three things: standardized methods, equipments and work conditions, because these are going to be used. Then select an average worker, not the best worker, because we expect the best worker not in all quarters. So we have to deal with the average worker. How much an average person can put in a standard day's work. Then what we do is divide this work into suitable elements, small elements. And here one caution is that the elements must be following each other. They should not be scattered. They should not be irrelevant. They should be following an order, that one comes second, third, fourth, fifth, like that. So the elements should not be unrelated. Alright? And then study the operator. After you have decided on the elements, you study the operator on the job, and you have to break it on different elements. Take multiple recordings. It's just not one recording that is going to determine the time study, but multiple recording, and then bring out the mode. And this time is recorded using a stopwatch, a very fine stopwatch which doesn't make much mistake. Then after you know how much time at different times, different spots, you find out the mode. The mode is most frequently appearing time value for an element. How much time is required frequently, not at the most but frequently. That is the mode. And then we have to give allowance, because once the worker has started fresh, his time may be less, but as he grows in the day, the time taken will be more. So you have to make allowances for, by adding time for rest, how much rest does he require, fatigue and such other factors to reach a standard time. You just don't take the recordings and come to a standard time, but you make allowances for fatigue, rest and all such things. Then you come to a standard time.
Is this time study now, is it related to the call centers kind of organizations?
Sorry?
Time study, the principles of time study, are they somewhat related to the call centers? Where
they are very much related, because you see, there you see you keep on getting calls on your mobile and telephone. How many calls per day one is supposed to make, and out of that how many which yield results, how many worthless, and how many just like that. So this kind of arrangement is worked by time study, because when the person makes a call and you see you are not interested, that provision, that allowance is already there. So he or she is quite relieved, because if this pressure works on that every moment has to be productive, then it's not going to help. So time studies are very important. Then what are the advantages? See, the ideal workload is what we were talking about. What is the ideal workload for a good day's work? That is determined by using the time study. I don't think working 12 hours every day is going to help. That is a far-fetched kind of a idea. Optimum, we have in psychology, we have determined that the attention span does not exceed more than 40 minutes at a time for the kids, and same is true for the adults. So at the most, with practice, with training, one can stretch it to 1 hour, but one needs to have rest pause, because then the fatigue sets in and the work goes bust. It doesn't help. So the ideal workload is determined. Then how do you evaluate a good person's performance and a bad person's performance? It gives you that measure to evaluate performance. Then what incentive should you give? If you find that at 1 hour, which is very crucial, especially you talked about the call center, there may be a time at say 2 o'clock in the midnight where the Americans are waking up and we are sleeping. Now, how do you make your worker remain awake? What time? This is where what incentive wage should you give if the calls, fruitful calls are made during that time, or a person is given that kind of reward. So suitable incentive wage, not a one-time affair but a part of the wage system that has to be brought in. Then through the time studies we can, because time is the most expensive commodity that we have, is fleeting every moment, accurate cost standards have to be brought in. Where do we have the measure, the means for knowing how much is the cost of one particular worker and his work? So accurate cost standards are determined by the time study. Then we have, of course, limitations, especially at the time of measurement. You see, different people can give different versions of their observation, but studies have shown that the same person, same observer gives different versions. So there is no standard way of judgment of the time. This is one major limitation, because personal bias does come in. If I am sleepy at 1 hour, I will try to judge the other person also by the same standards that I have. So subjectivity of the observer is there, and it's difficult to arrive at a correct method, correct standard. That is one very big problem. And the worst part is that whenever a worker is observed for time, he or she becomes too conscious, and we have found that it has an adverse effect on the worker. So these problems will have to be tackled. Now we come to the ergonomics, or the science of human engineering. Very plainly spoken, it is the combination of human and machine elements. How do we combine the two? Say for example, just one simple example, if you visit the toilet, earlier the latches were much above your hand level and you had really problem in reaching out if a short person goes and has the problem. So now the latches are at the body level. Even a child, very small child can't operate, but an average child of say 8 to 10 years can operate. So this is where the best combination of human and machine elements, where the switches should be put in. This is another important thing. What kind of switches? So you see different designs of switches suiting the needs of the work and the organization. This is a corollary that equipment design, hours of work, physical conditions of work are all the matters of study for ergonomics and do it scientifically, because this has to be driven by data, not by opinions alone. The idea is to minimize fatigue and maximize output. Again, it's a production centered effort where we are trying to make the worker so comfortable that his fatigue, like for example if he has to reach out many times, stoop, then his body is fatigued. So place the tools near his hand and where he can see eye level. Another purpose is to reduce accidents and injury, because unnecessary movements lead to accidents. If you are in the way of the other person, if you are too near on the assembly line and your movements are not synchronized, then it can cause accidents and major injury. Another purpose is to provide mental and physical ease. The person, if he knows where the things are kept, like a surgeon, if he knows that the correct instrument is to be given to him at the correct time and all are within his reach or her reach, then it is not giving that extra attention, where do I find, because at home you must be observing sometimes the screwdriver is misplaced and you keep on searching for it, so waste a lot of time. So provide mental and physical ease. Then we have the optimum design for machinery and workplace. This we are going into details. This is known as the architectural ergonomics. How much space? Basic question is, how much space is required? Neither we can waste space nor we can restrict the space. So optimum space for the kind of furniture that you are going to place, tools and equipments. If the equipment, say for example, if the equipments are small and one person is handling, then you need to place them at a distance from each other, because people should not come into close contact where handling the entire job by themselves. But if you are on an assembly line and heavy machinery is there, then machine requires the space. Human beings can be placed at the small spaces, small distances, where they know which part of the machine they are tackling. Especially with the computerization, automated machines, this is very important to know how much space. Too much of it is going to create a sense of vacuum, and too less of it is going to put people into physical contact with each other, which they may not like. But if they do not know that within 40 feet of themselves there is no person, they are all alone in a large room only with the machines, then they have a problem. So such problems is to be taken care of in placing furniture, tool and equipments. This is the architectural ergonomics. This is the starting point. Then we look at what kind of posture. If you are handling a computer, then you are sitting straight. So what kind of chair you require? One should not suffer from the spondylitis. This part is required. Then reach and vision of the worker, of the user, you must know, because this is the architecture of the workspace. How much vision? So what kind of the vision range that is required. How far can you place where it is clearly visible? Alright, if it is not, then you have to make provisions for that. Then a concept that has come is known as workspace envelope. This is actually a three-dimensional space within which one carries the physical activities like functional arm's reach, direction of reach and the nature of task. Now if you look at me, explaining the envelope, the envelope is including this place and my physical stature. How much hand I can easily reach this mouse or this keyboard. Alright, this is a three-dimensional envelope in which I am right now working. For each worker, such envelopes need to be created and understood by the management as well as the worker. It is just not that you create the envelope without letting the person know. So this is where the physical activities like functional arm's reach, how much can I reach without straining myself? This is one aspect. Direction of reach. Reaching back is difficult, but reaching in front, sideways is also difficult, because these are the little considerations that are required for creating that workplace envelope for each worker. And this is digital human simulation. This is basically talking about digitalizing the human activities and the workplace, and this has a huge cost, so one needs to look into that part and visualize. Instead of going into actual physical practice, one needs to visualize and simulate, and then put it into practice by verifying the measured data and predict realistic postures. And this is what the entire understanding of analyzing work in the workplace. This is mostly to deal with the physical part.
Thank you very much for such an indeed inspiring lecture. I hope the students are benefited by it. Thank you.